Welcome back to Watercolours with Caroline after our summer break. We're going to get started and back to painting with a simple little project, just a group of stylized flowers that we'll practice blending some analogous colours and making a pretty little border. I'll be working on Ash 140-pound cold press paper. Mine will be 4 inches by 6 inches, but you're welcome to make yours any size, any colour that you like. So get your paints ready and let's have some fun with paint. I'm working on this morning. My piece of paper is about 4 inches by 6 inches, and I've taped it down to my board so that I have a nice edge for when we want to make this border. Now, if you haven't taped it down, don't worry, you can put the tape on later if you want to put the border around these little flowers that we're making. And you need something circular to trace around. I have a toonie. There we go. Yeah, my camera was having a moment. Sorry about that. So I found for my size of paper, a toonie was a good size to trace around. Somebody at my class on Wednesday had a bigger piece of paper and she used a little tiny cup to trace around, and her picture actually looked really lovely with a bigger size. So it's totally up to you. But what we're going to do is put these 3 flowers in a sort of like a triangular composition, with one high up and then sort of one over to the right and then one a little bit lower down to the left. It's just a nice compositional arrangement for things. So let's start with the one in the upper left, and just very lightly, when you're tracing, we want to erase these lines after we've done this. So just very, very lightly outline your circle. This is just to help you draw the flowers. And then we're going to come down a little way for the one to the right and trace a little circle. And if you don't have a toonie ready and you're running around looking for a toonie, don't panic too much. And then I'm going to move this one down. So what we want to have is that kind of a triangle here. Leonardo da Vinci was the king of triangles. He used to love having triangles in his composition. Or if you look at his Madonna on the Rocks and things like that, you can form triangles everywhere. They're a wonderful way to have a composition. And also another good compositional rule is to not have your focus right in the middle of the paper. Now, I know we have a couple close to the middle, but we've got the top one higher up. So we're focusing higher up on the paper. Now with the stems, everything about this composition is looking at what works nicely. If you have an S curve is a beautiful thing to have in any composition. So all of these stems have a little bit of an S curve. Now it's not pronounced, it's just a little bit. And also they cross over at one point. Having things cross over is another lovely way to make a composition. So let's start with this one here, and we're going to do like a really gentle S. So sort of out here gently, come back gently, and sort of go to the bottom of the paper. It's sort of like a little string on a balloon. And we want to make this one crossover. So we're going to go the other way. Instead of repeating this, we're going to go the other way. So we're going to go this way and cross them over at the bottom. This one is going to go behind this flower. Again, having things go behind something is also a lovely compositional tool. So we're going to come around here, and I put mine a little bit too far over. Eraser. 1 second. I want to bring it a little bit more over here and then behind. I'm trying to figure this one out where it go. I can go here. So I've got to make sure it kind of comes in the right position. There we go. This is why you don't want to do your lines too strongly, because then they won't erase. From the stems that we've just done, to get the leaves, you sort of take your line up and curve it out like this. Again, you got curves. I'm going to take the light down a little bit. I'm just taking the light down a little bit so you can see the pencil line better. So I curve that round. That's the center of the leaf. And then I'm going to put the lines on each side of the leaf like this. Now this one curved up and around like this. So the second one up here, I want to have curving like up and pointing at this flower here. So it's not doing the same. Don't like do the same, repeat the same. Do something different. And this is curving up and pointing. What it's actually doing, if you follow the line of this leaf, is it's saying, bring your eye around here and around here. So it's not just like drawing a line and bunging a leaf on. It's actually really thinking, how can I make this composition work and not be boring? So we're going to put the two sides of the leaf on here. It doesn't have to be the same size as this one either. Again, it makes it really interesting if it's a different size. And then from this one, we want this one to bring you back in the opposite direction. So this one is going to say, see, if you carried on this leaf, it would come around here, this line, but we don't. We stop it here, put the two sides of the leaf on. And what that's doing, this whole composition is pulling you around and around this little study of flowers. And things like that, even though they look simple, require some planning and they require some thought. And they sometimes require a little bit of erasing if you find that you've, for instance, if you have this stem, what we tend to do is leaf. We tend to like to do the same pattern over and over, which is okay, but it's not as interesting as having those two leaves going in different directions. So we've got that part on. The circle is just to help us form the flower, and you've got two choices. You can have your flower petals pointed at the top if you want. You can choose, or you can choose to have your flower petals rounded at the top. So you make a decision, which one do you think you would like on your flower? And you're going to put a little dot here and a little dot here and a little dot here. So you kind of know where you're going to stop your three flowers, your petals rather. And then a dot right where your stem comes right here. And the first one, now you can, like I said, you can either have the top rounded or pointed. It's up to you. I'm going to go with pointed because it's just easier to draw. So you're going to sort of petal, just like doing the leaf, and petal using the outside of your circle. Same for this side, petal and petal using the outside of your circle. Now this one is going to cross over the two. So we're going to have a crossover there. Now these are stylized flowers. They're not actual flowers. We will be later in the series painting actual flowers. But like I say, this is to get started. This is to just feel comfortable with the paint again. Same thing for this one. I'm putting my 4 dots where my petals stop and end. And I'm going to, and don't make those dots big. You want to be able to erase those and put your petals in. And cross these over so you have a crossover line there. And same for this one. And if I put the dots on in the wrong place, I'm just going to ignore my dot and think, no, I didn't really get that dot in the right place. I want this one bigger. You can change your mind because I'm going to erase those lines. The stems, I want to actually have a little bowl on the stem and have some space to paint in. So I'm actually going to thicken up the stems and put them in a little thicker so I can have some paint in there later. And that's the pencil part finished. What I'm going to do is I I'm going to request that anybody that's logged on mute themselves. I know I can do that from here, but it means going back to the gallery view. So if you are logged on, I would appreciate if you muted yourself so we don't get background noise to the video. You are welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question at absolutely any time. So thank you. I hear people coming on and off, and just a reminder that background noise is really distracting on the video. Okay, so what I want now is a waterproof pen, because if I don't use a waterproof pen, as soon as I put my watercolor on here, it's going to bleed black pen everywhere. So for those of you that are new, the best waterproof pen is the Pigma Micron pen. They come in all different sizes. Another good one, I'm looking for my Sharp, whoops, dropped all my pens. A Sharpie is a very good one too, but I don't have one up here, but a thin Sharpie is a good choice. And there are lots of other brands. If they say waterproof, drawing pens are also good. I have a few different brands here, and they're all pretty good for being waterproof. But my favorite is the Micron pen, and I like it because you can get different sizes. I'm going to use a 03. And all of these lines that I've just created, let's think about that. I say all, but I'm not going to draw all of them. I shouldn't have said that. I'm not going to draw the circle. I'm going to erase the circle. And an important point, when I do the stem, I want to have the two sides to the stem, but this one is going to go behind the other one. So I'm going to stop here and take it behind so that you don't see both crossing over. I'll show you what I mean. I'll erase these so it's not confusing. So I have stopped the line here and put it behind the other stem. And I've done my stems a little bit bigger than I normally would, just so you can really see them. And this one here is going to go behind this flower and come out here and go behind this one. And so I don't want to see the back and the front of those stems. So it's important when you're doing the pen to remember that. And if I erase this circle, I'm left with just the petals. So we're going to outline everything. Do outline the middle of the leaf. Make any adjustments that you need to. And then you can take a soft eraser, something very soft, and make sure you get all of those erasings off your paper, or they're going to really interfere with your painting. I usually have a nice big brush for doing that, because every time you put your hand on your paper, you get oil from your hands, which is going to interfere with your paint if you're not careful. So I'm going to outline my other flowers. And my other leaves. And I realize that some of you may have prepared this already, so you're just watching. But I need to make sure that I go over it for the people that haven't got that ready, so that they see what we're about to do. And erase these circles and any lines, and be good and use a brush to brush my erasings off of here. Sorry, that jiggles the camera too. I should have maybe moved that. Got a little bit here. Now I pushed much harder than usual with my pencil so you could see it on the camera. But if you're doing it at home, you don't have to push as hard as me. And there we go. So I'm going to give you a minute and hope that you can catch up with the drawing. I'm going to pause for a minute. So just while I'm waiting for make sure everybody's sort of getting their drawing done, I want to talk about the colors we're going to pick, because we're going to use analogous colors to make this a pretty flower. And you can choose to have a different pair on each flower, or you can go with the same pair of analogous colors on each flower. That's totally up to you what you choose to do. I kind of liked mine with the 3 different pairs of colors. I liked how it turned out. So I'm sticking with that. And analogous colors are ones that are close to each other on the color wheel, not too close. Like these 2 here are too close. They would not show a difference in color. But if you went to sort of this violet over here and this pink over here, they work really well together because they're neighbors. They're not next door, but they're neighbors, and they always work well together if they're that close on the color wheel. If you go too far away, like this purple and this red over here, they don't work so well. They have to be close, but not the same. Same if you go this direction. If you sort of pick one of these purples and one of these teal colors that are kind of close, you kind of want to go like 1, 2, 3, 4 steps away. They work really beautifully together. And you can like go this way too. Like if you go sort of here and here, they work beautifully together. And same in this direction. If you sort of go from this bright red and you just go over here to an orange or a light orange, these work really well together. If you have like, 3 or 4 in between them, not too far apart. And then if you're going more in this direction, orange and yellow, they work okay together. There's not so much contrast, but when you get around here and you have a yellow and a green, again, they look lovely together. And we'll use those for the leaves, working with the yellow and green as analogous, and the blue and the green. If you sort of have a blue over here and a green over here, they will look lovely together too. So analogous colors are close to each other on the color wheel and always look good together. So I've got a few pairs here. The turquoise and the violet, 2 of my favorites together. And you'll find a lot of clothing employs this on clothing designs and floral designs and things. These 2 colors work beautifully. And all of the ones in between, like the lighter purples, different values, lighter turquoise, darker turquoise, gorgeous together. I've got the cadmium yellow and the cadmium red, a really bright yellow and bright red. Again, look lovely together. A permanent rose and a violet. So a cooler red, a cooler rosy red, and a violet color. And you need to go more blue with the violet rather than a rosy violet. Otherwise, you don't get that little bit of contrast between the colors. The yellow and the orange, not so much of a contrast, but they still work together well. You'll see that a cadmium yellow and a cadmium orange, a bit stronger, look a bit better together. And then a cadmium yellow and a permanent rose, again, really, really pretty together. So anytime you're looking for colors that work well together, pick your analogous colors. And that's sort of what we're working on today. And we're also working on color blending. I'll zoom in a little bit. You might want to practice the color blending before you start. I'm going to take a little bit of paper from somewhere. So it's up to you whether you use some student quality or good quality paper to just practice. And this is a very good idea if you haven't painted for a few months or you're new to it like Monica is. And just draw very, loosely, just draw a couple of petals on your 2 or 3 petals on your practice paper. And we'll have a practice with getting the paint working properly and how to do this blending technique. I'm going to practice I'm going to start with the violet and the turquoisey color. Now, you do not need to have the same colors as I have. It's completely up to you what color you use to do this. Now, I have several colors that work for the turquoise. One is cerulean. One is cobalt teal. I have one that's actually just called turquoise. You could also use phthalo blue. All of those will give you a cool turquoisey blue. I think probably the best one is the cerulean. If you are new to painting or if you're not sure, cerulean will work really well for you. And then I have a couple of violets on my tray. One's called Dioxazine Violet and one's called Ultramarine Violet. They're both good. Or you can mix a violet using rose and turquoise. So it's up to you. I'll show you. Let's zoom out a little bit. And if you don't have a violet, I'll show you a really lovely mix for a violet. So I actually have two lovely colors that mix well for a violet. I have a quinacridone magenta. I'll put this here. Probably the best one for mixing a beautiful violet. And if I mix that with a little phthalo blue, look what I get. I get the most gorgeous, gorgeous violet. Probably almost exactly like a dioxazine violet. So that is quinacridone magenta and a phthalo blue. Now I can do another one with permanent rose, which is very close to the quinacridone magenta, just not quite as intense. And again, I'll put some phthalo blue with that. And I get another lovely, lovely violet, almost the same as the one with the quinacridone magenta. I'll try it with my turquoise. I've actually not tried it with my turquoise before, so I'm going to try the permanent rose with my turquoise. The turquoise might be too greeny. If you start adding too much green to it, you'll get gray. But I think that's lovely too. So I've got three beautiful violets. I'll show you how they look next to this is a dioxazine violet, a little bit more bluish maybe. This is a dioxazine violet, a bit more blue than the ones I made. But if I wanted to change that, I can add some rose to that and it comes out almost exactly the same. The ultramarine violet is the, this one's really dirty, is the most gentle one. Mine's actually not looking very pretty right now. I think it's got a bit dirty with some blue in it. Clean it up a little bit. But I'm not very fond of the ultramarine violet. It's, if you wanted that, you know, you can mix a little bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of rose and you have exactly the same sort of combination, a bit more rose. So it's very, very, see, it's very, very similar. I've just mixed permanent rose with ultramarine blue and I get an ultramarine violet. So that's why you don't really need to buy all of the colors. You definitely need to have a cool red like a rose or a magenta. And you can't mix a violet with your warm reds or your warm blues. You just get gray. They don't mix. So you have to use your cool blues and your cool reds. You can get away with, if I use my rose, which is a cool red that's towards the blue, and my ultramarine blue, which is a warm blue, you can get quite a nice violet because of the rose being so cool that it does work. But once you start with like the cadmium reds and the ultramarine blues, you're just going to get some kind of gray colors. They're not going to be as nice. It starts getting like a muddy sort of color. So stick with your definitely with your cool pinks, or use something that's in your palette that says it's a violet. And I'm going to use any of those violets. I've got dozens of them now. And I will use for now the Cerulean Blue. I'll just put some on here. Cerulean Blue is a gentle, cool blue. Means it's more towards the greeny turquoisey side. So I think those two colors together will work really well. And I'm going to start by I want the colors to meet in the middle. Let's zoom in. There we go. This petal is dry. Everything's dry on here. And I'm going to take my brush. And for those of you who are new, this is a number 6 round brush. For the little paintings we're doing, a number 6 or a number 4, a little round brush is going to work the best. And I'm going to put a little bit of water just in the middle of this petal. And I'm going to take my cobalt blue and start down here at what I want to be the darkest part of the petal, the tip down here. And as it gets to the water, it's going to kind of like float into the water. Now, I don't want it to get out of control, so I'm going to wash my brush, dry it off a little bit so it's not too wet. And I'm gently just going to make sure this doesn't run away in the middle here. Just make sure that it's just going to take up a little bit of that water and paint, just a little bit with my brush to control it so it doesn't like zoom out of control. Now I want to go to the other end, to the violet, and I want to start right at the other end, not in the middle. I'm going to start at the other end here and come down towards that water. And just gently ease it into that wet patch there. So you're almost touching the blue. Now I'm going to wash my brush again and dry it off so it's clean and fairly dry, just a little bit damp. I'm just going to tease this paint in the middle just to kind of like pull it into there. Now, what I am getting here is a little bit of a background, which can happen sometimes if the end is dry and the middle is wet. And that's all about just learning to control the water. So what you can do, and of course, this is bigger than our petals are going to be. I'm going to try two different colors now. I'm going to do the yellow and the rose. I'm going to get a little bit of yellow ready. And the thing is, if you're a new painter, you need to make sure that your actual mix is wet, not dry. It should be shiny and wet and lots of paint. You can't paint with dry paint. It has to stay wet for quite a while. And the rose, that's why you mix it on your palette. You need paint and water, and they need to be wet, and your brush and everything. So for this one, I'm going to work completely on dry. But remember, my paint is wet. It's not dry. So I'm going to take my yellow from the point of the petal up to the center. No water this time. It's either method will work for you. It's just deciding which you are most comfortable working with, depending on how well you are using your paint and water. Now the pink is going to come from the other end. And just touch your brush. Just touch it to the paint in the middle. Don't do this. Don't paint it in like this. Don't keep painting it in, because what you'll get is this kind of an effect where you don't get a blending in the middle. You kind of get one coming into the other. And that's why you start from either end and bring them to meet in the middle. You can also use a little bit of water if you find your paints too dry and you want to use a bit of water to blend them. You can. Now the difference being here, where I wet this one over this side, I got a little bit of a background of water into the purple, and that made a very light area in the middle. That's okay. You can use that kind of effect. With this one, less so. It's going to kind of meet in the middle and just fuse gently. But your paint has to be wet to do that. It can't be dry. And I think the thing that beginners struggle with most is painting with wet paint. They have paint and brushes that are much too dry. And it's really hard to try and do that. I'm going to try. Like, they have a bit of paint on their brush. This is, see, when it makes a skip like this is too dry. So they have paint on their brush, And a beginner will keep painting, and they keep painting and painting to try and cover the surface. And they'll paint a bit more to try and cover the surface. And never dip back into the paint, never get any water to help them. And of course, once they come to get their purple and try and blend it, usually the paint by then is too dry to blend properly. Now, one thing that's helping me is I have a really good quality brush that doesn't really allow me to do dry brush. If I wanted to do dry brush, I'd have to get a poor quality brush. So that is helping me with this blending process. But then beginners tend to like keep trying to get the blend to happen by pulling the paint into the other one. And it doesn't happen because the paint is too dry, the brush is too dry, and there's too much painting happening, too many brush strokes. So if you're a beginner, the thing that I encourage you to do is make your paint puddles wet. See, this is still wet, really wet. Make sure your brush is wet. Make sure you dip back into your paint often, because your paint should like sit up on your paper and be raised up from your paper and be very shiny. 3 brush strokes and you dip back in. It should be wet and shiny for a long, long time. And I'm sort of overemphasizing that here, but it's so important. And then if I come from the other end with wet paint, and the last thing I do is just touch them in the middle. They're wet for a long time, which means they can do some blending for a long, long time. And eventually they will settle into the paper and look very soft. So I hope you've all had a chance to practice that. I'm covered in paint as usual. Clean my hands. So let's get our little drawing out. And this is quite a small, well, mine's quite small anyway. So I don't need a big brush. I'm going to use my number 4 brush to do this, so I'll have more control. And I can still see a little bit of pencil line there that I haven't got rid of. But get rid of all those erasings. They'll get stuck in your paint and make a horrible mess. So I'm going to start with the blue and the lilac on the top one here. And I'm not going to wet my petal. They're so small. I'm not going to. And we're going to do them in a certain order. So first of all, the right and the left. So first the right and left petals. Now a little bit of blue. See, it's such a small petal that you don't really need the water in the middle. A little bit of blue here. Clean my brush, dry it a little bit, pick up my violet and start at the top, not the middle. And I'm going to just dab my brush to take a little bit of paint off. Start at the top, come down, and just let them meet in the middle and leave it to do its own thing. Don't keep brushing it in. Don't keep painting it. Don't keep painting brush strokes. Just let the water and the paint settle in. Now we're not going to do the middle one because we want some layering to happen. We're going to do the left one. Again, same order from the bottom, just using the tip of the brush, the little pointy tip of the brush. And then the lilac from the top down. And let them meet in the middle and let them do their own thing. Just let them sit there and do their own thing. And now we're going to leave this one to dry before we do the middle petal, because what we want to happen is this double sort of layer effect over the middle one. You could do them all at once, but you won't get a double layer effect, and you will get bleeding from the first 2 into the third one, which may not be what you want. The second one I'm going to do with yellow and rose. And like I said, you can choose to do them all the same or different colors, totally up to you. And they're so small, you can try another one afterwards. Make a few little birthday cards for people. And put the yellow on. And I've got to remember I'm doing rose this time. Get some rose and come down. And just let them meet in the middle. Now, that one's not too well fused. So I've dried my brush and I'm just using the tip of my slightly damp brush to just encourage them across the middle there to blend. One on the right, back to the yellow. And again, don't do yellow first and think you're saving time, because by the time you get back to put the rose on, it will dry and they won't meet. So if you try to be, time saving or paint saving, it's just not going to work for you. Again, I've just washed the brush, dried it. I'm just going to use that dry tip of the brush just to encourage that middle part to blend together. And then we're going to leave that one and come back to it when it's dry. The third one, I'm going to use rose and violet. So I'm going to reverse this one. This one's got violet on the top. So I'm going to reverse it and put the violet on the bottom. So if you weren't sure what I meant just now about don't do both of them, I'm saying don't do both of them with your violet, thinking that it's saving time or paint, because this one will be dry before you get back to do the blending. And then take my rose from the tip, coming down, touch the middle. I'm just going to dry my brush off a little bit so it's not too full of paint. And with it almost dry, just gently ease those into the middle there. It looks pretty intense until it dries, and then the paint dries quite a bit lighter as it starts to dry. So same thing, I'm going to get my violet at the bottom here. Clean, and then rose for the top. Dry my brush a bit before I encourage the middle to just blend together. If your brush is too wet and too full of paint when you get to the middle, all you get is like too much paint, too much water, maybe a background. I have like a little sponge here that I just sponge off a little bit of the water and paint so that my brush is still damp, but it is not adding too much paint or water, especially to something as little as this. Now I'm going to pause again for a moment. And I put it back on mine. And I know some of you are still painting, but I'll tell you what the next step is going to be, so you can sort of move on. The next step is going to be to do the leaves and the stems. And we're going to do it exactly the same way using yellow and green. Now, you can use any green that you like. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see my palette. I have a Sap Green that I really like. And it's just a nice, easy one if you're doing a little painting like this. It's an easy one to use, but you may not have Sap Green. So you could use any sort of green that you've got that looks a little bit like this, like a leafy green. So don't use a phthalo green or viridian green. They're too bright. If you only have phthalo green or viridian green, you can use them, but you need to modify them. I'm just going to mix mine with that little bit of cerulean blue. And then I'm going to get some nice bright yellow and mix it with that phthalo green. Quite a bit of yellow. And it's still very bright, so I'm going to take a little bit of ultramarine blue and just bring it down to a more natural green. So if all you've got is viridian green or phthalo green, you can modify it with yellow and a little bit of blue. It's still not the same as the sap green, but it's good enough for doing what we're doing. If you don't do that, then you have another option. I have my yellow over here, so you can use yellow and blue to make a green. So there's yellow, and ultramarine blue is just a great one, or cobalt blue. And you can mix the two together, a yellow and a blue, to get a green. So we're not really fussing about what green you have, as long as it's not a bright viridian green or phthalo green. They're not natural, but they can be made natural by a bit more. I add a bit more yellow to that one. A little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue makes them pretty natural. So you need just a natural green. And I really love, this is a core sap green, and Daniel Smith sap green are gorgeous. Some of the other sap greens are not that nice, but core and Daniel Smith are really lovely. Oh, it's just a great one when you're not wanting to fuss about mixing too many greens. And yellow, of course, we're going to use yellow. Grab some, clean my palette. Oh my goodness, I'm getting in a real mess here with the yellow. It's very, very sticky. It's an M.Graham yellow, and it's made with honey, and it's my most sticky color. It always gets on everything, yellow all over the place. I look like I'm jaundiced now. It hardly dries up at all. So there's always loads of sticky yellow everywhere. It's lovely and bright. There we go. There's some yellow. I'm going to start with any of the leaves. It doesn't matter which one, but the same process. So let's zoom in a bit so you can see a little better what I'm doing. Same process. Yellow on first, sort of starting at the bottom of the leaf. Wash my brush, dry it off a little bit. Get some green, and green from the top of the leaf, coming down and meeting the yellow halfway, or I would guess actually 2/3 of the way. A little bit more green than yellow on these ones. I'm going to grab the yellow. I have to be careful I don't grab too much water. I don't want back runs, and just put a little bit more yellow on there. Same thing with this one. You don't have to have them all exactly the same, like the petals. I kind of think that I'm going to have more yellow on the top here, maybe where the light is hitting the top of that leaf. I'm going to be a little bit different. And take my green and have my green more on the bottom of the leaf. So this one's just slightly different to the other one. And this will be helpful for you when we do realistic leaves later in the series, when we have some flowers that we need to put realistic leaves on. The same technique for getting the light and the dark and the variation in the leaves. And this one, I'm going to sort of do the same, mostly yellow on this side. And then my green. I'm going to take from all three of those greens that I made. So I've got a variety of greens on my brush, and bring them down. Just drying off my brush a little bit so that I don't have so much water or paint in the middle. Bring that down. It just, see how much more lively a leaf looks when it has that duality of color on it, the bright and the dark. And we want to do the same thing for the stems. So the middle of the stem, and have some yellow on there, and get some green. I'm going into those darker greens I mixed with the ultramarine blue. And I'm going to start at the top and come down and meet that yellow. And then come from the bottom up, meet the yellow halfway. Now I have to be careful because if I do the stem behind this now, I can get a little bit of bleeding over, which doesn't always matter with the stems. I just have to know that that might happen. But I will work on, before I work on this one, I'm going to work on this one, put a little bit of yellow on here. And then get some green. This is why you need a little bit of space in the stem to put your color in. Some green here. And some yellow. Take some yellow down. And some green. So we've got a nice variation. And last one. Now I am aware that there might be some crossover and bleeding of color between these ones. I don't think I'm going to worry too much about that. It's going to be under control because the paper is dry and it's not going to get anywhere except on the stems. And I think it will be fine. Now, the other thing you can do, if you want to, is put some of the pinks or the lilacs in the stem as well. I always like to do that, especially near the flower. So I'm thinking up here, near this flower, there's rose in the petals, where this would be shaded. I'm just going to put a little bit of rose in there. And I'm just taking my damp brush and just encouraging it down. And because there is a little bit of lilac up here, same thing. I'm just going to add a little bit of lilac in here, just let it flow down. And here pink, because I've got lilac right next to the stem. Just a little bit of pink. And maybe just a little bit here at the bottom. Now, what these complementary colors do with the green is give you some gorgeous, gorgeous shadows that are not brown, that are not gray, that are not dark green. They give you a complementary shadow that may turn like a dark green or dark gray, but they give a beauty to the painting that is so much more beautiful than just trying to make a dark green on there. So think about that when you're doing a shadow on green. Use your complementary, a rose or a violet. Violet is beautiful for doing a complementary shadow on a green. And later, where these cross, when this is dry, you could put a little rose behind this stem to put that one behind the stem. Right now, it will kind of bleed in. So, somebody, Michelle, are you able to mute your sound, please? Because it's sort of in the back. Thanks. It's in the background.
I was sure I did already. I'm on mute. I don't know.
Oh, are you? Okay. And I'll come out a little bit so you can sort of see where we're at. And what should my flowers are completely dry by now. If yours aren't completely dry, you can always use a hairdryer. I'll pause and I know mine is completely dry now, and it's time to finish off these 3 petals using the same combination of colors. But if you're going over the top of dry paint, you don't have any bleeding happening of the paint, and you have that kind of lovely double layer happening. So I'll get my cerulean blue again and start on this one. So you're going to paint this whole petal, not just the little bit in the middle, but this whole petal, as if the other 2 weren't there. And then you'll get a double color on the middle part. Go from the tip down. And just the middle, sort of not painting the middle, it's sort of just encouraging with an almost dry brush the paint to blend in the middle. And see, what you get is where these two petals cross, you get a double color there. So you get a layering. Anytime you draw or paint flower petals and you want that layering to happen, you can do it by drying each layer and then going over on some of the petals. And it looks really beautiful if you have several petals on a flower to do that. I'll go to the one on the right, same thing, my yellow, going over both sides, the whole petal, and over everything that's there. And a little bit of rose. And come from the tip down. Need to clean my brush, dry it off a little bit. Just use my wet brush to encourage that down into the middle. And third one is my lilac and rose. This kind of layering works really well for sweet peas and those kinds of flowers that have a very delicate, translucent petal. And a little bit of rose. Oh, there we go. And because I dried my stem, this one that goes behind here, take a little bit of rose and just there, I'm just going to pop a bit of rose there and there to kind of just put that behind there. One thing I really like to do is I just sometimes like to put a little bit of rose in the leaf as well as that kind of complementary shadow to the green. Because watercolor is transparent, translucent, it'll show through. You'll see the green through the light rose layer in it, and it will all work together. A little bit more yellow with that rose there. You're seeing it very close up here with the zoom, so you see all the imperfections that you really don't see when you see the whole thing normally. I'm always amazed when I've got the painting in front of me, it looks fine. I look up at the camera and I think, oh my goodness, this looks terrible. But the camera tends to focus on all the detail too much. So we've got that bit. Now, I'll let you catch up with the painting part, and then we're going to see about how to do a colorful border around your flowers. And this is really nice if you want to make them into a card. And if you do want to do a colorful border, you need to have 1/4 inch or about 5 centimeters taped off along the edge of your flower. Now, if you have it on a big block, just on a page, you can just with a ruler, like find a frame around your flowers and tape it off with some masking tape or washi tape. And if you don't have any, just watch and think about that for the future and get ready to do the border. Now, this border here is, I think it's about, let's see what it is in inches and millimeters. It's 1/8 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters, this border. I did this one even thinner. This one is more like, this is just a 1/16 of an inch, and it's just 1.5 millimeters. It's very thin. So you can decide if you want a really thin border or a slightly thicker one. I don't recommend going any bigger than the 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch, unless you have big flowers, because if you go much bigger than that, it's going to overpower your flowers and take all the attention away from them, and it's not going to be in the right proportion. I kind of like my thinner one that's just really thin, but it's up to you. I will do this one. I will do it the 1/8. I like working in imperial. I'm just more used to it, and because all of the paper comes in imperial sizes, and so do all of the frames, and so do all of the mats and things. So I'm just on my tape, not on my paper. I don't want to have marks on my paper. On my tape, I'm just marking off 1/8 of an inch, or like I said, it can be, what did I say, 3 millimeters, if you want to work in millimeters, about that. I'm just marking that off on the tape. On either end. I've got my little marks, and we're going to do it one side at a time. We can't do all 4 sides at once. It doesn't work. And make sure that all of this is dry. You can't put masking tape on wet paint. You're going to really disrupt the paint. And I'm just going to leave, let's pull back a bit. Now I've put that tape on, but I don't want to push it down hard on the paint. The paint's new. It's only just been put on there. It's only just barely dry, but I do want to push down hard on the edge where I want the paint to go. Another tool you can use, like I said, you shouldn't really use your finger on the watercolor paper because your fingers have oil on. Mine have paint on, kind of dangerous, but you can get in the dollar stores these tools for pushing down paper, and they're great for pushing down paper. They're $1.25, I think, in Dollar Tree, and called they are Japanese originally. They were made of bone. They're called a bone folder. They use them for smoothing down their origami paper to get really nice crisp folds, but it's great for making sure that tape and stuff is glued down firmly. And do that on the other side. And I just want to get the edge firmly down on the side where I want the paint. Now, if you have paper, student paper that's not cotton, the tape will rip your paper, and I will show you how to avoid that when you take the tape off. But if you just pull this tape off of student paper, pulp paper, it will rip. It'll rip your flowers, it'll rip your paper. So be very careful. And I will show you how to take the tape off without ripping. Now I'm going to pause the recording there. Okay. So I think you can see that just fine. So we're going to paint the 2 sides first, and then heat and remove the tape. And I will use a hairdryer because I want to make sure it's all dry and the tape comes off nicely. And then we're going to paint the top and the bottom. Now you can probably see why we can't, I'll just show you why we can't do the top and the bottom at the same time. Because if I put a piece of tape here to do the top, I would be missing this piece of paint and this piece of paint and this piece of paint and this piece of paint. I'd be missing lots of bits of paint, so you can't do it all at once. But what we're going to do is we're going to let the colors we've used blend in the border here. And we have to be very careful about how we do that, because some colors, when they mix together, make gray. For instance, if you put yellow next to purple, you will get gray. If you put the yellow next to blue, of course, you'll get green, which you may or may not want. I kind of don't want any green in my border. I want to keep it my floral colors. So I want to make sure that any color I put next to another color is going to make a floral color. So I will start with yellow. And I'm going to start with yellow here. And I'm going to paint down this way. Don't paint side to side, because you will get paint going underneath your tape. Even if you've like pushed it down well, that water will creep under there. But if you paint downwards like this, it will be less likely to seep under your tape. And it depends on the quality of your tape, it depends on the quality of your paper, and it depends on how firmly you burnish that side down. So I put my yellow on there. Now I know that the rose will mix really nicely with the yellow and make an orangey color that will be a floral color, and it will be the same as I've used here. So I can put rose next to my yellow, just like we did with the flower. And I'm bringing it down, not with a straight, I don't want it to come to like a straight edge like this. I want it to come to a sort of a pointy transition like this. Whoops, dropped my brush. Now, next to the rose, I know that violet is a good color to put next to the rose. It will make a pretty transition, and that's something I used in my flowers. So I will get my violet. And I will put it next to the rose. Now you may say, but on the flowers, we came from the point upwards and met. Well, that's not going to be as easy doing this border. If you just start next to the rose and pull down, you're going to have quite a nice transition there. We don't have to be as fussy as we were with the petals. Next to my violet, I know that the blue looks quite pretty. So my last color will be blue. I might take my violet just a little bit further so that I finish up with the blue. And take my blue down here. Take it down to the corner. Now, you don't want to have too many colors in there, but it's nice if you reflect some of the colors that you did in your flowers. What you don't want to do, not for any real amazing reason, but you don't want to repeat that combination here. I don't like it when things repeat. It's not as interesting. Mix it up. So I'm going to start, instead of blue at the bottom here, I'm going to start at the bottom with yellow and come up this side with the yellow. So I'm gonna have it going opposite to this one. And then next to yellow, just like before the rose. If you just did 2 colors in your flowers, you can just alternate between 2 colors. You don't have to have all the colors I'm having. If you did different colors, then you can alternate again. It's up to you. Just be aware of the kind of order that you work in so that your colors blend together nicely. So then my lilac. And then the blue. And being careful, I did not use too much water, because I know if I use too much water, it will seep under the tape on me. And also I'll get a nice bright border. I just a couple of patches there. Now, I do want to dry this with the hairdryer, but I want to let it settle in as well. The paper has texture, and the paint will settle into that texture in the paper, and it will go deeper into the paper, and it will make a much more intense permanent color if you let it soak into the paper before you dry it and evaporate off all of the moisture. Because if you evaporate off the moisture too quickly, the pigment will still be floating on top of the paper rather than soaked into the grain. A good rule of thumb is to look at it, and if it's no longer shiny, this is no longer shiny, this is okay to just finish off with the hairdryer. But this side is shiny, so I just want to give that a minute or so to soak in and for the water to evaporate off, and then I will finish it off with the hairdryer to make sure that it's perfectly dry, and so that I can peel my tape off safely. Now, while I do the hairdryer, I will mute so that you don't hear a horrible, horrible sound. There. Now you only take one side off because you still need to have the other sides on to do the top and the bottom of this. And I peeled off the tape while it was warm so that I didn't get any ripping or tearing or peeling of the paint or anything like that. And then you have to throw this away. Don't be wanting to save the tape and use it again. If you try using it again, you're going to get a bleed under the tape. You're going to get paint from the previous one. It's just not going to work. It's not worth saving that little bit of money on your tape to have a mess of your whole painting. So again, I want to make sure that I have 1/8 of an inch measured off on my tape each side, or whatever you decide is going to be your border. And then I'm going to put the top and the bottom. Make sure it's firmly down on there. And here. There. And I'll zoom in again. Now you also have to think now what colors you have in the corners here, and what do you want to happen with the color you put over the top of those colors. Now I think you could put yellow over the top and get double yellow. You could put rose over the top and get a lovely sort of orange happening here. But you have to think when you get to here, again, what do you want to put over the top of here? If you put yellow over the top of here, you're going to get green. So think about what is going to work for that. I'm thinking that lilac over the top of here will look nice, but I've also got to think that if I have rose over the top of here, what can I have next to the rose? Do I want lilac? And then what do I want? Do I have blue over here? I have to really think this one out. So I'm going to go with just 3 colors, I think, because otherwise I'm going to get myself in a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to start with rose. And then I'm going to go to the lilac and finish with blue, and not worry that I've got blue over blue. I could, I mean, I could do it differently. It's just that I think this will work for this one. And the corners are quite tiny, so you don't have to really worry about it too much. Just have to be aware of what colors you're making when you go over the top of the other color. And same at the bottom. I don't know whether to reverse that or do a slightly different order at the bottom. If I do purple over here, I have to think. I don't want pink and pink. I might just have to reverse that order to make it work. Oh, I have the same order but in reverse. So the rose here, then the violet. Good thing I made lots of violet at the beginning. Puddles of violet here. And the violet. And then the blue. And again, it's got to soak in. The paint has to dry a little bit. And then eventually when it's dried a little bit, I will use the hairdryer to finish it off. Now there's no reason you have to have a colorful border. If you would just like to have, say, green and yellow and blue, sort of like your stems and leaves, that would make a really pretty border too. This is just what I chose for my border. So you don't have to have these colors. If you just want two colors, that's fine as well. So you have a lot of choice in this, and same with the flowers. A lot of people in the Wednesday class did just one color for the flowers. Some people just did the blue and the violet for the flowers. It looked really pretty. And Lisa did a background. She actually put some mottled sort of very pale yellow and different colors in the background, which looked really pretty as well. So you have a lot of choices. You don't have to do it exactly like this. You could have the rounded petals. You could have your petals going outside of the circle a little bit. You could be a little bit more free. I've tried to keep it very, very concrete so that if anybody's new to painting, you've got some good sort of concrete instruction, not just do what you'd like to do. But once you get the hang of it, you can sort of start to experiment a little bit and do what you'd like to do with it. I can still see a little bit of a shine on there. So I'm going to leave it a minute or so more to dry. I'll pause the recording. So I got a little bit of bleed through here where it went under my tape. Very unusual because I really did put that tape down nice and firmly. It could be that the yellow wasn't really perfectly dry. It could be I just didn't get it down as firmly as I thought, but that's okay. When you're peeling back the tape, it's really important to hold on to the corner. This is where it will tear if you're going to get a tear if you don't hold the corner, and peel the tape back at an angle, not just like not rip it off, like a band-aid. Just gently peel it back at an angle, holding the paper down. Like I say, the corners are the most vulnerable, especially when it's like this, when it's not taped across the top. This corner is extremely vulnerable. So you need to have your finger there, very gently expose that corner and at an angle, just peel the tape back. And if you don't have cotton paper, do it while the hairdryer's warmed the glue. Last one is usually where I get impatient and rip the corner. There we go. Now, I'm not going to fuss about this bleed through. If I do anything to try and fix it, I'm just going to make it look way, way worse. Nobody except me is probably even going to notice that at all. They're not going to see it. When people look at your painting, they see the whole thing. They don't see any little mistakes that you see. They don't see anything that you didn't want to happen. They just see the whole thing. And I had somewhere, what really picks up your painting is if you have some lovely colored card that you can put it on a lovely colored background. Really picks up all the other colors. So pick a color that's in your painting. Pick a color that's darker than anything in your painting. If you pick a color that's lighter, it really detracts, it desaturates your color. Pick a color that's darker in saturation, and it will really enhance your colors and make them look better. So for a background color, you could choose a really lovely dark rose, or a very dark purple, or a really nice dark blue, or a very dark turquoise, a very dark green. All of those colors will look lovely behind it. Just don't pick a light color, because it will suck the color out of your painting and make it look a little washed out, which is it's really unusual what other colors will do to your colors. So there we go. I know that was a fairly quick and easy one, but it got us painting again. And a few things to learn in that one: how to blend colors, how to do a composition, how to do a cute little border. And hopefully that got us all off and started again. So I'm going to stop the recording at this point and just chat to you and see how you're doing, see if you need any help, any questions. How did your flowers turn out? I hope you were happy with them, and you can always make them into a beautiful little greetings card for somebody. So thank you for joining me. Next week we'll be back again with a bird's nest and some beautiful eggs to go in that nest. Happy painting, everybody.